The air atop the Astoria Crest Hotel tasted like money and ocean salt. Harbor City sprawled below, a grid of neon and shadow, its arteries clogged with the ships Cassie and Locke commanded. The rooftop gala was loud with the quiet clinking of glasses and the murmur of men who measured their worth in tonnage and political favors. A jazz trio played somewhere in the background, a soundtrack too smooth for the business being done. Cassie and Locke, at 37, moved through the crowd with a stillness that drew the eye. He was the new Don of the Locke Syndic, a title he never used, to the city. He was the billionaire philanthropist who'd inherited a logistics empire. To the waterfront, he was the man who ensured the tides moved only when he permitted. His suit was charcoal gray, severe, and worth more than most cars. He listened to a city councilman drone on, a slight, almost invisible smile playing on his lips. The councilman, emboldened by champagne, leaned in. "They say you're soft, Locke, that you've got the port in your hand but won't squeeze." Cashin's smile didn't move. "Oh, that you won't touch anyone with a badge," the man whispered, afraid of the IB. Cassie and Locke laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was sharp and cold, like ice cracking in a tumbler. "Fear," he said, his voice a low rumble, "is a tool. Councilman, not a hindrance. You should learn the difference." He turned away, leaving the man pale. Mira Solis, 31, felt intensely out of place. She balanced a tray of champagne flutes, her black uniform crisp but borrowed. She was here to serve, not mingle, each hour bringing her closer to the down payment for her bakery. Her daughter, Juniper, was supposed to be with a sitter, but the sitter had bailed, leaving Mira with an impossible choice: lose the night's triple pay gig or bring June. June, small for 8 years old, sat quietly on a stone bench near the elevators, sketching the neon skyline in a small notebook. She was a good kid, patient, but Mira's stomach was in knots. The crowd shifted as a local news crew aimed a camera toward the mayor. Cassian, caught in the edge of the light, took an instinctive step back, his hand raising slightly to shield his face. He hated the press, hated the digital record. It was that movement, that slight flinch, that June saw. She had stood up to ask her mom for water and, in her hurry, blundered directly into the side of Cassian's leg. He barely moved, a human bulkhead. June bounced off him, her notebook scattering. "Oh, goodness, I'm so sorry, sir," Mira said, rushing forward, her tray rattling. Cassian looked down, his annoyance clear. But before he could speak, June, rubbing her head, pointed a small finger straight at his chest. "You're a coward." The jazz trio seemed to hit a sour note. The murmuring stopped. The entire rooftop, filled with the most powerful people in Harbor City, went utterly silent. Mira's blood ran cold. "June, apologize right now." But June didn't move. She just stared up at the tall, frightening man who had flinched from a camera. Cash and Locke stared back. Then, to the astonishment of everyone, he laughed again. This time it was deeper, genuinely amused, but no less cold. "Am I?" he stated. "Yes," June said, her voice clear as a bell. She planted her hands on her hips, a perfect miniature picture of defiance. You jumped when that light hit you. My mom says only people with bad secrets jump like that." "June?" Mira's voice was a strained whisper. "It's all right," Cashin said, holding up a hand. His eyes, the color of the deep harbor at midnight, were fixed on the child. "She's not wrong about the secrets." "I'm not," June agreed, emboldened. "You think you're important, but you're just scared." She jabbed her finger at him again, a tiny prosecutor. "I dare you. You come to my school on June 17th. It's Hero Day. If you're not a coward, you'll come and tell us what you really do to help people." It was an ultimatum delivered by a third grader. Cassian's amusement flickered, replaced by something else. He was frozen, not by the girl, but by the mother standing behind her. Mira Solis met his gaze. There was no apology in her eyes, no pleading, just a fierce, independent wariness. She was terrified. Yes, but not of him. She was terrified for her child, but she would not beg. Cassian finally broke the stare. Looking back at June, he crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to her level, though he still towered over her. Hero day, he mused. Kid, I'm not a hero. I just sign checks. Mira's voice cut in, sharp and clean. Kids don't need checks, she said, her grip tight on the empty tray. They need someone who stands up straight. The words hung in the air, a direct echo of June's challenge. Cassian looked at Mira, truly seeing her for the first time. The defiance, the exhaustion, the spine of steel. It was a combination he hadn't seen in a long time. Before he could answer, his phone vibrated in his pocket, a single, insistent buzz. He pulled it out, his smile fading as he read the encrypted text on the dark screen. IIB opening inquiry? Pier K-17. His jaw tightened. Pier K-17 was his. The Interstate Integrity Bureau was the one opponent he respected, the only one with badges he couldn't buy. We have to go, Mira said, grabbing June's hand. I'm so sorry for the interruption. Wait, Cassian said, his mind already shifting gears, calculating, but they were already gone, disappearing toward the service elevator, a mother and daughter swallowed by the crowd. He stood for a moment, the rooftop party resuming its hum around him, but the taste of salt and money had turned bitter. He took the main elevator down. As the mirrored doors slid open to the marble lobby, Mira and June were just exiting the service door 50 feet away, heading for the main entrance. Ma'am, he called out, striding toward them. Mira flinched and turned. Please, we're leaving. I wanted to say. He never finished the sentence. The street-level quiet was shattered, not by a bang, but by a series of wet, heavy thwips, suppressed gunfire. The grand glass doors of the Astoria crest exploded inward, dissolving into a deadly rain of fractured crystal. A black pickup truck, no headlights, screamed past the entrance, the barrel of a weapon visible from the passenger window, spitting silent fire. Mira screamed, pulling June flat to the ground, covering her daughter's body with her own. Cassian didn't hesitate. His reaction was not thought, it was instinct. In 2 long strides, he crossed the space, grabbed both Mira and June by the backs of their clothes, and hauled them behind a massive, ornate marble planter. He pushed them down, his own body covering them both, his expensive suit scraping against the marble floor. Bullets chewed the stone where they had been standing just 1 second before. The pickup truck squealed its tires, making a hard U-turn for another pass. Cassian pressed them against the cold floor, his head up, his eyes scanning the street. He was breathing hard, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Tucked beneath his arm, 8-year-old June Solace stared up at him. She watched the man who had laughed at her, the man she had called a coward, place his entire body between her and the gunfire. His face was no longer amused. It was hard, focused, and absolutely, terrifyingly still. The word coward shattered as thoroughly as the hotel's glass doors. The marble was cold beneath them, the smell of gunpowder and shattered glass sharp in the air. Cassian did not move until the echo of the truck's engine faded into the city's hum. Stay down, he commanded, his voice a low growl. He was already speaking into his watch. Egress, code black, Astoria lobby, now. He pulled Mira to her feet first, then scooped June up into his arms before she could protest. The 8-year-old was stiff with shock. Her notebook clutched to her chest. Mira stumbled, her ankle turning on a piece of debris, but Cassian's hand on her back was a steel brace, shoving her toward the service corridor. This way, do not stop. They bypassed the public elevators, plunging into the concrete bowels of the hotel. He led them to a humming freight elevator, all grease and scarred metal. The ride down was silent, the air thick with the smell of old machinery and Mira's trembling breaths. June just watched him, her eyes wide and dark over the edge of his arm. A black armored sedan was waiting in the loading bay, its engine a quiet thrum. He bundled them into the back, sliding in beside them as the car peeled out onto the service roads, merging with the dockside traffic, leaving the sirens of Harbor City behind. "Where are you taking us?" Mira finally found her voice. It was shaking, but edged with anger. "That was not random. You brought that to us." "We are going somewhere safe," Cassian said. He was looking out the window, his jaw set, his gaze sweeping the familiar gantries and cranes of his territory. "And yes, I did." The car descended a ramp beneath a building that looked more like a fortress than an office. It was all dark glass and reinforced steel, jutting out over the water. The sign was discreet, the Lockery, his private headquarters. They were taken to a residential suite that was as Spartan and severe as his suit. Minimalist furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows showing the entire working harbor, and an overwhelming scent of ozone and sea air. "My head of security will be here in a moment," Morhe said, setting June down. "She will get your information." "We're not giving you any information," Mira shot back, pulling June behind her. "I want to go home. I want my daughter away from you." "Home is not safe." He turned, and the cold authority from the rooftop was back, amplified. The men in that truck were not amateurs. They were sending a message. To you, not to us. You were standing next to me. That makes you part of the message. He gestured to the sterile, untouched kitchen. "You are safer here than anywhere else in this city. You will not be harmed." He saw the fear in her eyes, but also the calculation. She was measuring him. "You're going to pay me. Is that it?" she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Hush money. A 5-star cage until I forget what I saw." Cassian almost smiled. "I was going to, but I see now that would be an insult to us both." He moved to the bar, pouring 3 glasses of water. He handed one to Mira and one to June. "I'm offering you protection. 3 nights, that is all. You are not my prisoners. Miss Solace. But until I know who gave the order, you cannot leave." The heavy door opened, and a woman entered. She was as sharp and cold as the building, her hair pulled into a severe bun, her eyes missing nothing. "Sir, the perimeter is secure. We scrubbed the hotel feed." "Ara, this is Mira and June Solace. They are our guests. Level 5 protocol." Ara nodded once at Mira, a flicker of assessment, then focused on Cassian. The truck was a ghost, stolen plates, blind alley dump, but the shell casings matched the signature of the Cobalt Saints. Cassian's posture stiffened. Vesper Cade. "He's moved up from simple smuggling," Ara said. "He's using a refrigerated food chain to wash his cash, aggressive and sloppy." This attack wasn't sloppy. "It was a statement," Cassian said, his mind racing, "and it happened precisely when the IIB decided to start sniffing around K-17. He looked at Ara. "We have a leak, a deep one." "My thoughts exactly," Ara said. "I'll start the sweep." She turned to Mira. "Ma'am, I'll need to process your phone." Mira handed it over without a word, her fight seemingly drained, replaced by a cold dread. Ara left the room. "Get some rest," Cassian said, his tone final. He moved to his own office, a vast space 1 floor down, dominated by a single desk and a wall of monitors. He barked orders, his team moving to trace the leak, to find Vesper, to answer the IIB. He sat, finally alone, and played the audio file that had arrived just hours before the gala. It was an anonymous tip, heavily modulated, a gruff, waterfront voice talking about dock schedules. "They're not looking at the reefers," the voice crackled. "The real weight is in the fuse ledger, an offline book. Got all the dirty schedules for the whole port. Vesper wants it, the feds want it. Whoever gets it, wins." The voice chuckled. "It's a real-time bomb, ticking down, be a hell of a show, especially around, say, June 17th. Cassian stopped the recording. June 17th, the same day the girl had thrown at him. A coincidence. It had to be. But the hair on the back of his neck stood up. He deleted the file. Upstairs, Mira could not rest. The silence of the apartment was deafening. June was asleep on the vast, sterile sofa, exhausted by the terror. Mira paced, finally stopping in the kitchen. It was stocked for a chef, but clearly never used. She found eggs, chicken, vegetables, pasta. She needed to do something with her hands. An hour later, the smell of real food chicken noodle soup filled the high-tech suite. She made a small bowl for June, then, on an impulse, took the large pot down the hall to the security station where two of Cassian's men sat watching monitors. They looked up, surprised, as she ladled soup into coffee mugs for them. They were big, hard men, but their expressions softened. "Thank you, ma'am," one of them murmured, the warmth of the soup a small, human truce. Cassian found her there when he came up to check the locks. He watched from the shadows as she quietly took the mugs back. A single act of grace in his concrete world. He stepped into the light. "He's on the move," he said, not as a warning, but as a fact. He held out his hand. In it was a small plastic security badge, the kind for a child, shaped like a cartoon ship's wheel. "For June," he said. "It's a little captain pass. It will let her move freely on this floor in the roof garden. My men know it." June, now awake, walked over and took the badge. She studied it, her expression unreadable. Then she looked up at him, her eyes as clear and defiant as they had been on the rooftop. "I'll pay you back for it," she said, "if you don't show up on June 17th. She pinned the badge to her shirt, a tiny plastic shield. Cassian had no reply. Later that night, Ara Vale called him to the command center. "You need to see this," she said, tapping a monitor. It was a long-range camera, focused on the public pier directly across the channel from the lockery. A figure stood at the railing, staring right at them. He was unmistakable tall, lean, with a shock of white blonde hair, Vespercade. He knew they were watching. He smiled, a wide, predatory slash in the grainy night vision. Then slowly, he raised one hand, he held up 4 fingers, he folded one down, 3. "What is he doing?" Cassian asked, his voice low. "Counting," Ara said, her own voice tight. "He's counting down. It's 4 weeks to June 17th, 4 weeks to Hero Day." The suite he had put them in was a guest apartment, practical and sterile. The next morning, he moved them. The penthouse of the lockery was a different world. It was a cage of glass, suspended over the harbor, with a 360-degree view of his domain. The city lights, even in the day, felt close enough to touch. "You will be safer here," he stated. It was not a suggestion. Ara Vale stood by the private elevator, her presence as unyielding as the steel beams. "Miss Solace, June. My name is Ara. I am Mr. Locke's security advisor. The perimeter of this floor is absolute. No one gets in. Which means," she added, her eyes locking with Mira's, "you do not get out without my clearance." Mira set June's small backpack on the floor. The luxury of the apartment, the white leather, the chrome, the sheer, terrifying expanse of glass was meant to impress. It only made her feel more trapped. She turned to Cassian, her chin high. "I have conditions." Ara's eyebrow twitched, but Cassian just watched her, his expression unreadable. "I am not your prisoner," Mira said, her voice steady, "and I am not your guest. I have a job. I work a 5 a.m. bake shift at the artisans market, and at 3 p.m. I pick up my daughter from her school. I am going to do both of those things." "It's not safe," Ara said flatly. "I don't care," Mira retorted. "You can have your invisible men follow me. You can put a tracker on my shoe, but I will not hide. I will not have my life dictated by him," she gestured to Cassian, "or the men who are after him, and I will not." She finished, her voice dropping. "Take $1 from you." Cassian was silent for a long moment, the city's muted roar filling the room. He looked at this woman, who had nothing, who was demanding everything. He had bought and sold men for less. "Agreed," he said. Ara looked stunned. "Sir, I must advise." "You will arrange a non-visible escort. She follows her routine. That is final." He looked back at Mira. "Your independence is preserved, but while you are in this building, you follow my rules." The next few days found a strange, tense rhythm. In the mornings, Mira would vanish before dawn, a ghost car trailing her to the bakery. In the afternoons, she would return with June, the little girl's presence a strange, bright light in the sterile penthouse. One afternoon, Mira came up to the rooftop garden, a wild, wind-swept space of green, to find June and Cassian. Cassian, in his shirt sleeves, had uncoiled a heavy, thick mooring line. "No, not like that," he was saying, his voice patient. "You have to balance the weight, feel it swing. It's not about strength, June, it's about timing." He was showing her how to throw the line, how to cast the heavy monkey's fist knot. June, small and serious, tried again, her entire body heaving as she threw the line, which landed in a pathetic coil 5 feet away. "It's too heavy," she complained. "It is," he agreed. "So use the weight, don't fight it." He adjusted her stance, his large hand gentle on her shoulder. Mira watched from the doorway. She'd only seen this man command, dismiss, and control. She'd never seen him teach. She'd never seen him listen, truly listen, as he was now, to the complaints of an 8-year-old. She saw the man who ran a criminal empire, who had shielded them with his body, now patiently explaining nautical physics to a child. It was a crack in the armor, a glimpse of something she did not understand, and it unsettled her more than his violence. That evening, the true danger shifted. Cassian received an encrypted message, not from his people, not from the IIB. It was an anonymous file. He opened it in his private office, the door locked. It was a photograph. Mira! She was walking out of a coffee shop, laughing, her hair caught in the wind. It was a candid, happy shot, and it was dated 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks before the gala, 2 weeks before she had ever crossed his path. The blood drained from his face. This was not about him. The attack at the hotel, Vespercade, the IIB, they were all strands, but this photo was a different thread. They were not watching him. They were watching her. He found her in the main living area. The sun was setting, and the glass walls were on fire. June was asleep. Mira stood by the window, watching the ships, a silhouette against the dying light. "You need to stay away from the windows," he said, his voice rough. She turned. He crossed the room, his hand hitting the panel, heavy. Automated curtains slid shut, blocking out the sky, encasing them in an intimate, soundproof world. The sudden confinement changed the air. The room shrank. He could smell the faint, warm scent of her skin, something like vanilla and salt. "What is it?" she asked, seeing the look on his face. "What happened?" "I received a new piece of information." He stopped, standing barely 2 feet from her. He was too close. They both knew it. "The threat may not be what I thought. It might center on you." "Me, that's impossible. I'm nobody." "Nobody has enemies like this, Guy," he said. He watched her, the intensity of his gaze a physical weight, the long, chaotic day, the new threat, the proximity. It all converged. She had a smudge of flour on her cheekbone. She had baked for his men again that morning. He had the irrational urge to wipe it away. He found himself in the kitchen with her hours later. June was long asleep. The day's adrenaline had crashed, leaving them both raw and exhausted. Mira was making tea, her movements small and precise in the vast, silent kitchen. "You should sleep," he said, his voice low. "So should you," she answered, not looking at him. She was trying to get a bag of confectioner's sugar from a high shelf, her fingers just brushing the edge. He stepped behind her. "Allow me." His body brushed her back as he reached up. He was a wall of heat and muscle. She froze. He brought the bag down, his hand covering hers for a second as he placed it on the counter. A cloud of fine white sugar dusted her hand. "Sorry," she whispered, pulling her hand back. "Don't be." He did not move away. His hand came up, his thumb brushing the sugar from the back of her hand, a simple, practical gesture that felt anything but. His touch was slightly rough, calloused, and shockingly warm. Her breath hitched. He looked from her hand to her eyes. The air was electric, thick with unspoken things. His gaze dropped to her mouth. He leaned in, slowly, giving her every chance to turn away. She did not move. The first touch of his lips was a question. It was tentative, searching. She tasted of tea and sugar, and he found himself drowning. He deepened the kiss, one hand sliding from the counter to her waist, pulling her flush against him. She made a small sound in the back of her throat, and her hands came up to rest on his chest. He pulled back, just an inch, his forehead resting against hers. Their breath mingled. He was the most powerful man in the city, and he was trembling. He whispered a single, hoarse question against her skin. She gave the slightest nod, a small, trembling acceptance. That was all he needed. His mouth was on hers again, not gentle this time, but deep and possessing. He lifted her, setting her on the cold marble counter. Standing between her legs, the cold of the stone was a shock against her skin, a contrast to the heat radiating from him. His hands were in her hair, at her waist, pulling her shirt free. He took her wrist, his grip firm, and pressed her palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. It was hammering, a frantic rhythm that matched her own. "Mom," the small voice from the doorway shattered the moment. They sprang apart. Mira's face was flushed, her shirt untucked. Cassian turned, shielding her from view, his body language shifting instantly from lover to protector. June stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "I'm thirsty." Mira's heart was still pounding. She shared a quick, private look with Cassian, a shared secret before sliding off the counter. Her role as mother instantly reassumed. "Of course. Sweetie, I'll get you some water." After June was settled, Mira returned to the kitchen. Cassian was still there, leaning against the counter, his back to her. "Cassian," and she said, her voice quiet. He turned. The moment was gone, the air cool again. "On the rooftop," he said, his voice rough. "You know why I laughed when she called me a coward." Mira waited. "Because she was right," he admitted, his gaze fixed on the dark city beyond the glass. "I sign checks, I move containers, but I was afraid. Afraid of what the IIB could do. Afraid of standing up straight. As you said, it's easier to be the villain everyone expects." "And now?" she asked. "Now," he said, turning to face her, the intimacy from before returning, but as a different, sharper bond. "I'm afraid of what happens on June 17th. The next morning, the city exploded. The Interstate Integrity Bureau, coordinating with a federal task force. Mira had never heard of the FPCX, or Federal Port Commission X Delta hit Pier K-17 at dawn. It was not a quiet inquiry. It was a full-scale raid. News helicopters that usually hovered over traffic jams now swarmed the harbor, their cameras zooming in on federal agents carrying evidence boxes from a warehouse bearing the Locke family crest. The headlines were immediate and brutal. Locke's dirty charity harbor, Kingpin's empire raided. Philanthropist or fraud, WB investigates Cassian Locke. In the penthouse, the glass walls now felt like a microscope lens. Cassian stood before the news feed, his face carved from stone. He was not angry, he was cold. "They were led," he said, his voice quiet. "This wasn't an investigation. It was a performance." "They're painting you as a front," Aura Vale said, her fingers flying across a tablet. "They're claiming the logistics routes are a cover for the Cobalt Saints, and that you're in business with Vesper." "Vesper is using my routes, not working with me." Cassian snapped. "He's a parasite. Find out how he's doing it, and find out how the feds knew exactly where to look." "Already on it," Aura said. "The IIB couldn't have navigated that pier without a map. Our internal container tracking system. It has a backdoor, a digital master key that bypasses our manifests. It's clean work, deep level." "Who?" "Took me 2 hours to trace the origin. It was installed 6 months ago from a terminal that bypasses all security." Aura paused, and her hesitation was more damning than an accusation. "The terminal registered to Julius Penn." Cassian didn't move, but the air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. Julius Penn, his chief financial officer, the man who managed the clean side of his empire, the billions in legitimate assets, the man who had been with his father. Mira, who had been quietly making coffee, set the pot down. "Julius Penn," she repeated. Cassian turned to her. "You know him." "I think so." She frowned, accessing a memory. "When I was saving up, I worked at a small pastry shop in the old quarter. There was a man, older, always in a perfect suit, silver hair. He came in every Friday. He'd buy one croissant and tip $50. Every time. We all thought he was just an eccentric, rich, lonely guy. But it was him. Julius Penn. He was marking me. He knew who I was long before I knew who he was." The implication hung in the air. Julius had been tracking her, just as Vesper had. Before Cassian could process this, Ara spoke again, her voice tight. "Sir, a package just cleared security. It's analog." It was a small, antique wooden box, the kind a sailor might have used, smelling of salt and old varnish. It had been delivered by a bonded courier with no return address. Cassian opened it. There was no bomb, no threat, just a single faded photograph. It was Mira. She looked younger, maybe 5 years younger, standing on a pier, laughing. Her hair was longer. Next to her, his arm draped casually around her shoulders, was a man with kind eyes and unruly brown hair. Tucked under the photo was a small, typewritten note. "The fuse ledgers and lightener." Cassian handed the photo to Mira. Her face went pale. "Who is he?" Cassian's voice was gentle but insistent. "His name was Leo," she whispered, her fingers tracing the man's face. He was June's father." "He's gone," she said, her voice hollow. "He was a journalist, freelance. He loved the water, loved the stories of the harbor. He called himself a sea storyteller. He'd go out for days, talking to dock workers, to fishermen. Then one day, 5 years ago, he didn't come back. They found his small boat adrift. No note. Nothing." Cassian looked at the note again. The fuse ledgers and lightener. A whistleblower. A journalist digging into the dirty schedules of the port. A man who got too close and disappeared. "He wasn't a journalist," Cassian said, the pieces clicking into place with sickening precision. "He was my father's first problem, and now he's mine." He looked at June, who was sitting at the vast dining table, carefully drawing a picture of the little captain badge. She was the daughter of the man who had created the fuse ledger, the offline book that could destroy everyone. "The FPCX just leaked their next move," Ara said, interrupting the heavy silence. "It's all over the internal feeds. They've issued a private ultimatum to your lawyers. Surrender the fuse ledger by June 17th, or they will arrest you, publicly, at your next scheduled appearance." "They don't have a next scheduled appearance," Cassian said. "They do," Ara said, turning her screen. "They're referencing a public commitment on the morning of June 17th at Maple Haven Elementary School. June's Hero Day, the feds were using his promise to an 8-year-old as a deadline." "It's a pincer move," Cassian said, pacing. "The FPCX thinks I have the ledger. Vesper Cade knows I don't and is trying to get it. And Julius Penn, my CFO, is playing both sides against the middle. They all want the same thing." He stopped, a dangerous, calculating light in his eyes. "Fine, let's give it to them." "Sir?" "Bait. They're all fishing in my water. Let's throw some chum." He looked at Mira. "Julius is a money man. Vesper is a brute. The feds are procedural. We'll use a language they all understand." He began issuing commands. "Ara, I want you to draft a new ESG report. Environmental, social, and governance, all corporate nonsense. Fill it with glowing self-praise. But I want you to embed a pricing error in the K-17 logistics data, a multi-million-dollar discrepancy. Make it look like a sloppy, panicked attempt to hide something." "You want to publish a fake report?" Ara asked. "I want to publish a target," Cassian corrected. We'll leak it to the financial press. Julius will see it and think I'm trying to cover my tracks, that the real ledger is vulnerable. Vesper will see it as a sign of weakness, a treasure map. Let them fight over the bait. While they do, we'll find the real ledger." "How?" Mira asked. "You don't even know where to look." She was still holding the wooden box the photo had come in. She ran her fingers over the lid, then stopped, her head tilting. She lifted the box, sniffing the raw wood of the interior. "What is it?" Cassian asked. "Oil," she said. "Machine oil. It's faint, but I know this smell." She inhaled again, her eyes closing. "It's heavy, coarse, with a hint of rust solvent. When I worked at the bakery, we were near the K-sector rail spur, the maintenance yard." Ara was already typing, pulling up schematics. The K-sector, the old maintenance depots, most are abandoned. "Not all of them," Mira said, her eyes snapping open. "There was one. The mechanics called it the Red Yard, because the doors were painted bright red. They said it was the only place that still serviced the old diesel engines." Ara's fingers found it. A map pinpointed a single isolated warehouse deep in the K-sector. Its official designation was defunct. Its unofficial tenant, listed in a dark web directory, Cobalt Saints. "Vesper's secret base," Cassian said. "The package didn't just have a photo, it had an address." The date was set, June 17th, the day a little girl had dared him to be a hero. It was no longer a deadline. It was a horizon, and everyone, the feds, the criminals, and the man who was both, was now racing toward it. The Red Yard was a cacophony of metal on metal, disguised in greasy, borrowed dockworker overalls. Cassian and Mira moved through the cavernous space, the air thick with the smell of diesel, rust solvent, and the salty damp of the harbor. The roar of arc welders and pneumatic hammers provided perfect cover. "The office," Mira said, nodding toward a grimy, elevated glass box. She had a knack for this, a calm he found unnerving and attractive. Inside, among the shipping manifests and coffee-stained logs, they found it. Not a single ledger, but a system. "Leo was smart," Cassian murmured, pulling a hard drive from a hidden compartment beneath the main terminal. "He didn't make one book. He scattered it." Mira ran her finger down a smeared shipping log. 6 containers, all marked for disposal, but all recently active, all routed through this yard. 6 hard drives, Cassian finished, his mind racing. "The Fuse ledger isn't a book, it's a library. Vesper doesn't know. He's looking for one thing. We're looking for 6. They were heading for the adjoining container field when the world turned white. A bank of floodlights snapped on, pinning them like insects. A voice, amplified by a bullhorn, boomed from a gantry above. "Working late. Lock the Cobalt Saints appreciate your dedication." Vesper's men, not Vesper himself, but his front line. A heavy container latch sprung open, and a half-dozen men charged out. "The tunnel!" Cassian yelled, shoving Mira toward a dark opening in the concrete foundation. "Section 4 go!" He didn't wait for her. He grabbed a heavy iron pry bar from a stack and moved to meet them. It was not a fight. It was a brutalist ballet. He was not a brawler. He was a tactician. He used their momentum against them, a blur of focused, economic violence. Mira didn't run. She found the tunnel opening, a black maw that reeked of low tide and salt water. She turned, screaming his name, but he was already disengaging. Sprinting toward her, he grabbed her hand. "Now!" They plunged into the darkness, sliding down a slick, mossy incline. They hit the water below hard, emerging in a storm drain that emptied onto a low-service pier. An electric port cart, used for hauling small cargo, sat a few yards away. A whine and a spark from the tunnel opening told him they were out of time. Another cart. He threw Mira into the driver's seat. "Drive straight to the end." The small electric vehicle whined in protest, its wheels sparking as Mira slammed the accelerator. They shot out onto the pier, a second cart bursting from the tunnel behind them, gaining fast. The pier was a narrow strip of concrete and steel, a canyon of containers on one side, the dark water on the other. "They're faster," Mira screamed over the whine. "Keep going," Cassian yelled, bracing his feet, his eyes on the rapidly approaching end of the pier. It was a dead end. "Cassian, it's a dead end." "I know." Below them, chugging slowly out toward the fog bank, was a heavy tugboat. "We're going to jump," he said, his voice calm. "You are insane. Probably on 3. He grabbed her, his arm locking around her waist. 3. He didn't wait. He launched them both off the edge. They fell, a chaotic tumble of limbs, crashing hard onto the tug's steel deck. They rolled, the impact jarring every bone. The cart they had been in smashed into the barrier above, a shower of sparks raining down. They scrambled behind a massive coil of rope, hearts pounding as the tugboat, seemingly on autopilot, moved steadily into the channel's fog. The air was cold, damp, and suddenly utterly quiet. Are you hit?" Mira whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm fine," he grunted, pushing himself up. He moved his right arm and a sharp hiss of pain escaped his lips. "You are not fine." In the dim light from the cabin, she saw it. His overall was torn open from his shoulder to his bicep. The fabric was dark and wet. "It's a scrape," Ben, he said, but his face was pale. She shoved him into the tiny, warm wheelhouse. It was cramped, smelling of diesel, old coffee, and the sea. "Sit." She found a first aid kit under the dash. "This is going to hurt," she said, her voice all business. She cut the fabric away. It was not a scrape. It was a long, raw gash where he'd hit the tug's railing. She soaked a cloth with antiseptic. "Hold still." His hand clamped onto the bulkhead as she pressed the cloth to the wound. He went rigid, his jaw clenched, a low groan vibrating in his chest. But he did not pull away. The tiny cabin was thick with their proximity, the heat from their bodies, the sharp smell of the antiseptic, the steam of their breath fogged the windows, sealing them in. He was sitting on the floor, leaning back, and she was braced between his knees, her hands steady as she worked. The tug hit a swell, throwing her against him. His good arm shot out, his hand clamping on her waist to steady her. His touch was electric, a brand through her clothes. When she was done, her fingers, sticky with antiseptic and blood, lingered on the clean white bandage. He was watching her, his eyes dark with a mixture of pain and something else, something raw. "You need to drive," he murmured, his adrenaline crashing. "I don't know how to drive a boat." "Just keep it pointed at the fog. Keep us moving." She slid into the captain's chair, her hands gripping the wooden wheel. Cassian slumped, the fight gone, his head resting against the bench. He looked terrible. "Cassian." He just looked at her, his eyes half closed. She hesitated, then slid from the chair to the bench, gently pulling his head into her lap. He resisted for a half-second, then a long, shuddering sigh left him, and he relaxed. She took his good hand, lacing her fingers with his. They sat in silence, her hand on the wheel, his head in her lap. The only sounds the steady thrum of the engine and the distant, lonely moan of a foghorn. When they returned to the lockery hours later, Ara Vale was waiting, her face like thunder. "It's worse," she said, ignoring Cassian's injury. "I got the gunman from the gala to talk." "And," Cassian said, wincing as Mira helped him. "Vesper Cade ordered the hit, but the intel." Ara's voice was pure ice. "The intel came from Julius Penn. He told Vesper you'd be at the gala." Cassian's face went dark. "That's not all." Ara looked at Mira, her expression almost pitying. "He didn't just sell out Cassian. He sold you. He gave Vesper the route you take to June's school. He gave him her schedule. He was going to let Vesper grab your daughter to leverage you." Mira felt the floor drop out. "No." Cassian's rage was a terrible, silent thing. He became perfectly still. He walked to the window, his good hand clenched, and stared at the harbor. When he turned, his voice was chillingly calm. "Ara, activate Greenport Reserve. Full protocol. June is to be transferred tonight. She will not leave your sight." He was gentle with June, explaining it was a surprise adventure trip. But after the child was gone, in the care of Ara's most trusted agents, Mira finally broke. She slammed her hands against his chest. "This is my fault I brought her into this. I put my daughter in danger." "No." His hands came up, gripping her shoulders, his face inches from hers. "This is my fault. I'm the one who laughed on that rooftop. I'm the one who laughed at the word coward because I was too arrogant to understand what it meant. You didn't endanger her." His voice dropped to a raw whisper. "I did." The next day, the media, fueled by the raid, turned on her. The Solace Seduction one headline blared, "Gold digger mom traps harbor billionaire." "They're painting me as a whore," Mira whispered, staring at the screen. Cassian watched, his jaw tight. "Ara," he said, "leak something real." An hour later, the Astoria Crest Gala footage hit the web. The raw, grainy security feed. It showed Cassian Locke, not as a kingpin, but as a shield, covering Mira and June with his own body. The narrative flipped. Vesper, enraged, escalated. He flooded the dark web with a 7-figure bounty, payable to whoever recovered the fuse ledger, the deadline for collection. And for Cassian's life, June 17th, Hero Day was now a hunting season. The night air over Pier Novum was cold and sharp with the smell of rust and diesel. It was a sprawling, temporary field of stacked containers, a graveyard for cargo caught in logistical limbo. It was the perfect chessboard. Cassian stood on the roof of a harbor master's tower, the wind pulling at his jacket. Mira was beside him, zipped into a heavy-duty tactical vest over her clothes, a communications earpiece in. "The plan is double anchor." Cassian's voice was flat, broadcasting to Ara's team, which was hidden in the shadows of the yard. "Vesper wants the ledger. The FPCX wants me. We're going to give them both a target." Ara's voice crackled in their ears. "Team 1 is broadcasting a high-level, encrypted IEB signal near the west gate. The FPCX team on standby." She was referring to a rogue, ambitious unit within the federal agency. "Is taking the bait. They think they're about to bust an internal IIB operation. They'll be occupied." "That's the first anchor," Cassian said, scanning the yard with binoculars. "Vesper is the second. He thinks all 6 drives are in that decoy container, the one we leaked in the fake ESG report." "He's here," Mira said, her voice steady, far below a line of black. Heavy-duty trucks rolled through an unsecured gate, their lights off, the Cobalt Saints. As Vesper's men fanned out, a single figure appeared on the high gantry catwalk, silhouetted against the sodium-yellow work lights. "Cassian." The voice was thin, carried on the wind. Julius Penn, looking small and terrified. "Cassian, I know you're here. We have to talk." Cassian moved to the base of the crane, Mira at his side. "It's a little late for that, Julius." He projected his voice, letting the yard's acoustics carry it. "He'll kill us both!" "Locke," Penn shrieked, scrambling along the catwalk. "Vesper, he's unhinged. Give me the real ledger. I can trade it. I still have clearance. I can get us amnesty. Both of us. It's the only way." Cassian looked up at the man who had managed his family's legitimate fortunes, the man who had sold a child's location. "I'll give you one chance. Julius?" Cassian's voice was cold as the steel beneath his feet. "Confess. Tell me you did it. Tell me why." Penn's panicked mask broke, replaced by a sneer of pure, venomous greed. "Confess to you. Your father had the guts to build this empire. You're just a coward hiding behind charity." He lifted a small, black remote. "I've locked the primary container, the one with the real drives. Vesper gets it, or it drops into the ocean. It's my leverage." He had chosen Ara, Cassian said quietly into his mic. "He's lying. The drives are secure, but he's on the main crane. Light him up." The yard exploded. Ara's team set off a small, concussive charge near the FPCX position, drawing their fire. Vesper's team, thinking they were being double-crossed, opened fire on the FPCX. The entire pier erupted into a 3-way firefight. Julius, seeing his plan dissolve, slammed his fist on the crane controls. The massive gantry arm, with the 6-ton decoy container hanging from it, began to move, swinging wildly over the yard. "He's going for the water loadout," Mira yelled. "He's trying to drop it on Vesper's barge." "He's trying to create a distraction to escape," Cassian corrected, his eyes already tracing the path. "We have to get to the cabin. Cut his power." They ran for the service ladder, the wind howling, the air zinging with stray bullets. The climb was vertical, 100 feet up the swaying steel lattice. The wind off the ocean was a physical blow, trying to peel them from the rungs. Searchlights from the FPCX boats and Vesper's barge cut the darkness like white-hot knives. They reached the catwalk. Julius was in the cabin at the far end, but the container, swinging in a wide, sickening arc, blocked their path. "We have to cross!" Cassian yelled, clipping his own safety harness to a guide rail. "Wait for the swing." Mira hooked her own line. The gap was 10 feet of black, swirling air. As the container swung away, they ran. As it swung back, it smashed into the catwalk, the metal groaning in protest. "We have to jump," Cassian yelled, pulling Mira to the edge. "We have to get on top of it." "It's moving," she screamed, her knuckles white as she gripped the rail. He grabbed her, turning her body to his hands framing her face. He pressed his forehead to hers, forcing her to see only him. The chaos, the gunfire, the wind, it all faded. There was only his voice, low and urgent, his breath hot against her skin. "Look at me. We are tethered. If we fall, I fall with you." He didn't give her time to think. He kissed her. It was not a kiss of tenderness. It was a kiss of fire and salt, of gunpowder and desperation. It was a brutal, quick, determined impact, a transfer of all his will into hers. "Now," he roared. He unclipped them both from the rail, holding the single line. As the container reached the apex of its swing, he ran 3 steps and launched them into the void. They hit the metal roof of the container hard, rolling, the impact stealing their breath. Mira fumbled for a handhold as Cassian crawled, unhooking their shared line and securing her to the container's own anchor point. Julius, Cassian bellowed, pulling himself up. "It's over!" From the cabin, Penn just laughed, slamming the controls, trying to shake them off. "Ara," Cassian shouted into his mic. "He's locked us out! Shut down the grid!" "His remote is shielded." Ara's voice was tight with strain. "I can't block him, but I can overload him. 3, 2. The signal to the crane's magnetic clutch died. The container, suddenly free, dropped. It fell only 10 feet, crashing onto the magnetic locking field Ara had activated on the pier below. The impact was bone-jarring, throwing them flat. But they were safe. The ledger, in its 6 constituent parts, was secure. Vesper Cade, standing on the deck of his escape barge, saw it happen. He saw the FPCX agents swarm the now grounded crane. He saw Julius Penn being dragged from the cabin, his hands high. Vesper smiled, a wide, empty slash. He didn't run. He raised a hand, made a gesture, and one of his men launched a high-powered jet ski into the water. Vesper mounted it and vanished into the fog, his laughter echoing. A moment later, Cassian's comm crackled. It was Vesper, broadcasting on an open channel, a message for the entire harbor. "The bridge, lock, Hero Day, Ravenspan Bridge, noon. You want your city? Come and claim it. Or I'll show them all what a coward looks like before I burn it." The media narrative exploded. The Battle of Pier Novum was a viral sensation. The FPCX, furious and embarrassed, had Julius Penn, but the warrant for Cassian Locke was now public. Back in the penthouse, the sun was rising, painting the city in shades of gray. Cassian stood by the window, the gash on his shoulder bleeding through a fresh bandage. "I have to go," he said, his voice hollow. "I have to take the warrant. I can't show up. Not tomorrow. Not at her school." Mira, exhausted, dirty, and bruised, stood in front of him. "You said you were afraid of being a coward," she said, her voice quiet. "If you run, you prove Vesper right. You prove Julius right." "They will arrest me, Mira," he said, his voice raw. In front of June, in front of her entire school. So let them, she said, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. You have the ledger. You have the truth. The truth only matters if you're the one who tells it. Hiding. That's just signing a different kind of check. He looked down at her, at the absolute, terrifying clarity in her eyes. He knew she was right. I'll go, he said. I'll go to Hero Day, and I'll give them all the truth. That night, the night before the 17th, they didn't sleep. He took her to an old, decommissioned freighter he kept in a private slip, a black shape against the dark water. The city was a distant, jeweled line. On the cold steel deck, she turned to him. There was nothing left to say. She stepped into his arms, her hands sliding up his chest to lock behind his neck. He held her, his hands at her waist, pulling her tight. The kiss was slow, a deep, searching, aching acknowledgement of the morning to come. It was a kiss of fear and of trust. His lips moved over hers, a silent promise. Her fingers tangled in his hair, holding him. He breathed her in, the scent of her skin, the salt from the sea, grounding him. He held her, his body a shield against the dawn. I'm here, he whispered against her throat. I'm here, she replied, her voice thick. They stood for hours, two shapes in the darkness, waiting for the light. The morning of June 17th dawned bright and clear at Maple Haven Elementary School. Brightly colored banners proclaiming Hero Day snapped cheerfully in the breeze. The schoolyard, however, was a strange mix of festive and funeral. Parents with paper coffee cups mingled with a tense, buzzing energy. Reporters, kept at the gate by school staff, aimed long-lens cameras, a murder of crows waiting for a story. Dark suits dotted the perimeter. Men who did not look like fathers, the IB. They were polite, discreet, but they were a fence. The rumor already spreading through the parental text chains was an FPCX leak. Cassian Locke was coming, and he would be arrested on school grounds. He would be cuffed right on the auditorium stage. June Solis stood on that small, makeshift dais, her dress a defiant, bright yellow. She was not nervous. She was waiting. Her eyes were bright and absolutely determined. Beside her, on a folding chair, she had placed a piece of paper reserved for my hero. Cassian Locke arrived at 9:15 a.m. He did not come in his armored sedan. He came in a simple, unremarkable town car, with Mira at his side. The crowd parted, a sea of whispers and smartphones. He wore a simple, charcoal gray-blue suit. It was understated, practical. The collar of his white shirt was unbuttoned at the neck, a casual choice that just happened to hide the edge of the bandage on his shoulder. His hand was in his pocket, his fingers wrapped around a small, plastic ship's wheel. Mira had not slept. She had watched him record the video at 3 a.m. She had watched him attach the ledger files. She had watched him hit send to every major news outlet in Harbor City. She had wrestled all night with the urge to take June and run, to disappear, to find a life where men like Vesper and Cassian did not exist. But as she stepped out of the car, into the gauntlet of staring parents and federal agents, she knew she would not run again. She would stand straight. Cassian's confession was already hitting servers. It was not a plea. It was a statement. In the video, his face was bruised, his voice was raw, but his eyes were clear. He admitted to nothing the feds accused him of. He admitted to something worse. I let fear guide me, his recorded voice said, as news editors began to watch. I was afraid of the badge, so I hid. I was afraid of the truth, so I built a wall. He named Julius Penn as the traitor. He named Vesper Cade as the enemy of the city. He laid out the entire structure of the Cobalt Saints money laundering, using his own manifests as proof. And then, the final move, effective today, I am pledging the entirety of the Locke Syndic, its assets and its ports, into a community trust. We will clean our own house. But in the schoolyard, the crowd only knew what they saw: the criminal, the philanthropist, the man who was about to be arrested in front of children. He walked past the IUB agents, who tensed but did not move. their orders clearly to wait for the public moment. He walked past the principal, who looked like she was going to faint. He walked directly to the dais and stepped up. The yard went utterly silent. The only sound was the clicking of cameras. June looked up at him. She was not impressed by the crowd or the tension. She had a single clarifying question. She held the small, plastic microphone to her mouth. "You're here," she stated. Then she asked the real question, the one that had started it all. "Are you still a coward?" Her small, clear voice amplified over the speakers. "If you tell the truth—" The crowd held its breath. Cassian leaned down to her microphone. Ignoring the one on the podium, he looked only at her. "If you dare to speak it," he said, his voice resonating, "cowardice dies long before fear does." A sound, a heavy, rhythmic whump, 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 drowned out the principal's attempt to start the ceremony. It was a helicopter, black and unmarked, and it was circling the school, low and aggressive. At the same time, every phone in the crowd buzzed, a mass alert, a new link, overriding the news feeds. The video was live. Smirked, his white blonde hair whipping in the wind, grinned from the screen. "Hero Day, lock!" He screamed over the rotor wash. "I'm touched, but you're at the wrong party. Ravenspan Bridge, this noon. You want your city? Come and claim it." A parent gasped. The camera on Vesper's feed panned. Julius Penn stood beside him, on what was clearly the high catwalk of the bridge. But Julius was not a hostage. He was smiling, a frantic, manic grin. In front of him were two open, heavy-duty briefcases. Inside, visible even on the small screens, were complex wiring and detonator switches. Julius leaned into Vesper's camera, his voice a tinny shriek. "You wanted to be a hero, Cassian. You wanted to impress the children. You stay at the party. We'll bring the fireworks to you. Fire for fire." The threat was unmistakable. Cassian had a new, impossible choice: leave the school, leave his promise to June, and go to the bridge. Or Vesper and Julius would bring their war right to the schoolyard. He looked at the IUB agents, now drawing their weapons, unsure where to point them. He looked at the helicopter. He looked at June, who was just watching him, waiting. The schoolyard was chaos. Parents screamed, grabbing their children. The IAB agents shouted into radios, their authority dissolving. The FPCX team looked up, weapons raised, torn between the man they were sent to arrest and the helicopter now broadcasting a citywide bomb threat. Only Ara Vale moved with purpose. She was already in motion. Her own team, the Harbor Watch, a community security force Cassian funded, dressed in discreet gray emerging from the crowd. "Lock the school down," she commanded into her mic. "Create a clear egress. Get the parents moving. West exit only." They formed a human wall, separating the panic from the objective. The IUB agents, paralyzed by jurisdictional overlap, could only watch as she took control of their scene. Cassian Locke did not move, his eyes fixed on the screen showing Vesper's manic grin. Then he looked at June. She was just watching him. He stepped back to the small podium and handed her the microphone. "I came to keep my promise." "June," he said, his voice quiet but carrying, a strange calm settling over the dais. "I'm here, but there is one more appointment I have to keep, to make sure this school, and everyone in it, is safe. I have to go." June just nodded, her small hand gripping the mic stand. "You better come back." "I will." He turned. Mira was already at his side. "No," he said. "You are not going alone," she stated. It was not a request. "He used my daughter. He used my past. This is my fight, too." He looked at her, at the steel in her eyes, and knew arguing was a waste of the precious seconds they had. "Ara," he said into his comms, "we're moving. Ravenspan." The Ravenspan Bridge was the oldest artery in Harbor City, a colossal web of iron and steel. The wind at its apex was a physical force, screaming through the girders. Far below, the water was a churning mass of white foam. Smirked was waiting on the high arch, a human spider in his domain. Julius Penn was, as the video had shown, harnessed to a safety line. his face a mask of terror and manic triumph. He held the controller. 2 identical briefcases were strapped to the opposing support pillars, their red lights blinking. Cassian and Mira emerged onto the narrow maintenance walkway. Cassian ripped his phone from his pocket, attached a supplemental battery, and opened a public streaming app. The feed went live, piggybacking on Vesper's own signal. The whole nation, already watching, now had a second angle. Vesper, Cassian broadcast, the wind tearing at his voice. "You have your audience. I'm here." "The hero," Vesper screamed, spreading his arms. "Come to save the day or just to die." "I didn't come here to win, Vesper," Cassian said, his voice cutting through the wind, broadcasting to millions. "I came here to end the language of fear you trade in. It's over." "It's over when I say it is." Vesper pulled 2 long, hooked knives from his belt. "I'll peel you off this bridge myself." The fight began. Cassian and Vesper met on the narrow beam. It was a battle of opposing styles, Vesper. All chaotic, brutal slashes with his hooks. Cassian injured and tactical, using his grappling hook not as a weapon, but as a pivot, swinging to avoid, using the bridge's own structure as a shield. But the fight was in 3 places. As Cassian engaged Vesper, Mira slipped over the side of the walkway, clipping her harness onto the inspection rail. She disappeared into the belly of the bridge, the dark, echoing space of crossbeams, following the thick orange cables Vesper's team had run. On a technical walkway 2 levels down, Aravale moved silently. She found Julius Penn, left alone, his hands shaking as he held the detonator. He turned, hearing her, his eyes wide. "Stay back, I'll press it." "You don't have the code, Julius," Ara said, her voice a flat, cold monotone as she advanced. "Vesper wouldn't trust you with it. You're just the man who holds the switch." He lunged at her, swinging the controller. Ara sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and twisted. A wet, sickening snap echoed in the steel. Julius screamed, dropping the controller, which hung by a security strap. Ara caught it. High above, the fight was turning. Cassian, favoring his wounded shoulder, misjudged the wind. His foot slipped on the beam, slick with harbor mist. He fell. His safety line caught, jerking him violently, leaving him dangling, spinning 20 feet below Vesper. Vesper laughed, a high, piercing shriek. He didn't attack. He crouched, grabbing Cassian's harness line, holding the hero by a thread. He pulled a knife. "Look at the hero! Harbor City!" he yelled at Cassian's phone, which was still streaming. "He can't even stand up." Vesper held the line, enjoying the moment, taunting him. Cassian, hanging, looked up. He saw the triumph in Vesper's eyes. He saw the knife, and he saw his own path. "You're right, Vesper," Cassian said. "I can't." With a sudden, fluid motion, Cassian pulled his own blade and cut his own safety line. There was a collective, national gasp. He fell. He dropped 30 feet, crashing onto a lower, auxiliary girder, the impact rattling his bones, sending a blinding bolt of pain through his body. But he was on his feet. He was free from Vesper's control. He had regained his footing by accepting the pain. At the same moment, Aravale keyed her mic, patching Julius's agonized voice into Cassian's public stream. "Confess," she ordered, her voice like ice. "He made me," Julius shrieked, cradling his broken arm. "It was the Cobalt Saints Vesper Cade. All of it he paid me to leak the roots, to sell out Locke, to give him the girl's schedule." The confession hit the airwaves, a live tactical nuke. In the belly of the bridge, Mira reached the first briefcase. The wiring was complex, but direct. She followed the lines, her baker's precision serving her well. She found the primary detonator and, with a trembling hand, cut the wire. The red light went dark, one down. She scrambled to the second case. This one was different. The wiring was a mess, a nest of redundant, overlapping circuits designed to confuse, a booby trap. She patched her helmet cam. "Ara, I'm stuck. This second one, I can't read it. It's a parallel circuit, but it's wrong." In the Greenport Reserve Secure STEAM classroom, June watched the feed on a tablet. Ara, seeing what Mira was seeing, had patched it through. "June," Ara said, "stay calm. Look at the screen. Does this look like anything from your class?" June's face was pale, but her eyes were focused. "Mom," she whispered. "June, get off this channel," Mira panicked. "No. Mom. Wait." June's small voice was insistent. That's Mr. Henderson's trick box. We did it last week. Simple circuits. It's a trick. The red wire, the blue wire. They're dummies. He's trying to make you cut one. Don't look at the side. See that little silver pin? The one that looks like it's for the hinge. That's the real safety. He told us. Always check the simple mechanics. You just have to pull the pin. Mom, pull the pin. Mira's breath was ragged. She looked at the terrifying jumble of wires, then at the simple, unassuming silver pin. She trusted her daughter. She reached past the detonator and pulled the pin. There was a loud click. The armed light went dark. The second bomb was safe. Vesper heard Mira's voice over the open comms channel. He heard the confirmation. He saw Cassian, bruised and battered but alive, climbing back up the girder toward him, his entire plan, his challenge, his victory, all of it dissolved in the salty air. He stared at the man on the beam below, his face twisting into a mask of pure hate. He laughed, a high, broken sound. "You think you won?" he shrieked, his hand digging into his tactical vest. He pulled out a small, black remote, a different one, holding it high for Cassian's phone to see. A backup code, a dead man's switch. Hero, if I can't have this city, no one can. His thumb moved to the final button. "Wait!" Cassian yelled. Stopping his climb, his voice, amplified by the phone, was a desperate plea to the city he was trying to save. "Vesper, stop, it's me you want, just me." He let go of the girder, spreading his arms wide, a target. "Exchange my life for theirs. Take me." That's the real power. Isn't it choosing who lives? Vesper froze, his thumb hovering. He looked at Cassian, a perfect, willing sacrifice. He looked at the city below, and the sneer returned. "I don't want an exchange. Lock," he hissed. "I want everything, but I want your legacy in ashes, and I want you to watch me light the match." He pressed the button. Nothing happened. The briefcases remained inert. The red lights did not flash. Vesper smashed the button again. Furious, looking for a signal. Mira's voice. Not from the comms, but from above. She was hanging from a utility strut, directly over the spot where the second bomb had been. In her hand was the heavy, industrial magnetic lock from the Pier Novum heist. She had jammed it directly onto the bomb's backup receiver. "It's over. Vesper." With a scream of pure, animalistic rage, Vesper threw the useless remote and launched himself at Cassian. It was not a fight, it was a brawl. Vesper, all adrenaline and desperate fury, threw himself at the man who had taken everything. His hook knives were gone, but he was a street fighter. Cassian, favoring his injured shoulder, his body a map of bruises, did not fight back. He endured, he blocked, he parried, he absorbed the blows, his feet planted on the narrow beam. He was a stone against which Vesper's rage was breaking. Vesper, blind with fury, overextended a punch. Cassian saw his opening. He didn't strike. He grabbed Vesper's arm, twisted, used his momentum, and slammed him, face first, into the steel pillar. Vesper collapsed to the catwalk, his breath knocked out of him. Cassian was on him in an instant, his forearm pressed against Vesper's throat, his other hand raised for a final, bone-breaking blow. He stopped. He looked at Vesper, gasping and defeated, his eyes finally showing the fear he had peddled for so long. He heard June's voice in his head, a clear, bright bell. "Are you still a coward?" he thought of his promise. Cassian lowered his fist. He reached instead for the heavy-duty safety chain bolted to the bridge's railing. With a few practiced movements, he looped the chain around Vesper's chest, pulled his arms through, and secured him to the pillar with his own pair of handcuffs. He left him trussed like cargo, a living trophy for the IDB. "You're right," Cassian whispered, his voice ragged. "I'm not a butcher." A new sound drifted up from the city. It was faint at first, then undeniable. Applause. From the schoolyard, the principal, shaking, had patched Ara Vale's comms feed directly into the PA system. The entire crowd, the parents, the reporters, the IAB agents had heard Julius Penn's live screaming confession. They had heard Vesper's name. They had heard Mira disarming the bombs. Ara had simultaneously patched the feed to a local radio station. The whole city had heard the truth. The first IEB and FPCX tactical teams swarmed the bridge, their weapons raised. They found Vesper Cade, cuffed and cursing. They found Ara Vale holding a zip-tied Julius Penn by his broken arm. And they found Cassian Locke, his suit in tatters, standing in the center of the span, waiting. The lead FPCX agent, the one who had leaked the arrest warrant, lowered his rifle. He stared at Cassian, at the live feed still running on the phone, at the cuffed kingpin. He slowly, deliberately, unclipped his own handcuffs from his belt and put them away. "Mr. Locke," the agent said, his voice gruff, "you just made us rewrite the entire script. My orders were to arrest you on sight." He paused, taking in the scene. "Good work." Cassian barely heard him. He was looking past the agent, scanning the chaos. "Cassian." Mira emerged from the steel underbelly of the bridge, her face smeared with grease, her knuckles raw and bleeding. She ran. He met her in the middle of the span. He didn't speak. He couldn't. He just pulled her into his arms, his good arm wrapping around her back, his hand splayed wide, holding her as if she were the only anchor in the world. She buried her face in his torn shirt, her arms locking around his waist, holding him upright. They just stood there, shaking, in the middle of the wind, surrounded by federal agents. He pulled back, just enough to see her face. She was crying, but she was smiling. He kissed her. It was not a kiss of passion, it was a kiss of survival. It tasted of sweat and salt, of engine grease and cold, clean air. It was a long, deep, shuddering confirmation that they were alive. His hand moved to the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair, holding her. "I'm here," she whispered against his mouth, her voice trembling. "You're here," he breathed, resting his forehead against hers. "Mom?" The small voice cut through everything. June. She had broken free from the Greenport security team and was sprinting across the bridge, past the astonished agents. Mira broke from his embrace, scooping her daughter into her arms. "Juno, my baby. Are you okay?" "I pulled the pin. Mom," June said, her voice fierce. "I told you. I pulled the pin." Cassian watched them, his heart, which he thought was granite, feeling like it might break. June squirmed to be put down. She walked right up to Cassian, her face set in that serious, determined expression he'd first seen on the rooftop. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small, plastic little captain badge. She reached up, her small hands pinning it back onto the ruined, bloody lapel of his suit. She looked him square in the eye. "Are you a coward now?" Cassian Locke winced as he knelt, lowering himself until he was level with her. A slow, painful smile cracked the exhaustion and grime on his face. His eyes were red from the wind. "No more," he said, his voice thick. "No more." When the news hit the wires before the bridge was even reopened, with Vesper captured and Julius's confession broadcast live, the Cobalt Saints network, headless and exposed, fractured, Vesper's shadow accounts were seized by federal authorities by 3 p.m. The empire of fear had crumbled. 3 months later, the Harbor City port smelled different. The sharp, metallic tang of fear had been replaced by the bite of new paint and the simple brine of the sea. The Solace Locke Greenport Fund was born from the ashes of the Locke syndic Cassian, in a move that stunned the city's old guard, had dissolved his father's empire. He funneled its vast assets into a public community trust, prioritizing scholarships and school safety initiatives, starting with Maple Haven Elementary. He had officially, and very publicly, stepped down as Don. The title was buried with his father, in his place. The new Clean Port Council was formed, and at its head, appointed by a board of wary city officials, was Ara Vale. Her first act was to permanently shut down and decommission Pier K-17, letting the gulls in the sea reclaim the concrete. Mira Solis, in a move that surprised no one who knew her, had opened her bakery. It was a small, bright shop with a blue door, just a block from the harbor. The sign, painted in clear white script, read Day 17. She specialized in a sea salt caramel mousse cake. A portion of all profits went directly to the STEAM Club at June's school. The IEB, in their final report, concluded that Cassian Locke's extraordinary cooperation and testimony had been instrumental in dismantling the largest criminal network on the eastern seaboard. He was granted conditional freedom, his movements restricted to Harbor City, pending the completion of the asset transfer. He was a bridge between the darkness he was born into and the light he had been forced to find. The bakery was dark, save for the low lights over the prep counters. It was long after midnight. Mira was finishing a late-order cake, a dusting of powdered sugar like snow on her apron and cheeks. She heard the door chime. Cassian entered, shaking the autumn rain from his coat. He was no longer in severe suits. He wore jeans and a dark cable-knit sweater, the wound on his shoulder long healed. He looked tired, but for the first time, he looked at peace. "You're late," she murmured, not looking up from her work. "The council meeting ran long," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Ara enjoys making the old shipping barons sweat. I think she's having fun." He came up behind her, watching her hands move deftly, smoothing the icing. "It smells good in here," he said. "It always smells good in here," she replied, a small smile playing on her lips. He picked up a dusting wand, dipped it in the sugar, and gently puffed a white cloud over her hair. "Hey," she laughed, spinning around, wiping the sugar from her eyes. "You missed a spot," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He stepped close, his hands finding her waist, pulling her in. "You have flour," he said, his thumb brushing her cheek. "Just here." "And you," she countered, her own hands sticky with frosting, coming up to rest on his chest, "are distracting the staff." "The staff is overworked." He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. They stood like that for a long moment, simply breathing, the air thick with sugar and warmth. Their breath mingled. He tilted his head, his lips finding hers. The kiss was slow. It was not the desperate, frantic kiss of the bridge or the hesitant exploration in the penthouse. It was a kiss of deep, settled comfort. It was long, unhurried, a promise of every night to come. He lifted her, easily, and sat her on the cool stainless steel counter. He stood between her knees, his hands now framing her face, his thumbs stroking her jawline. She leaned into his touch, her own hands wrapping around his neck, pulling him closer. It was everything without needing to be anything more. They broke apart, both smiling. In their new, shared apartment, a small, handwritten sign was tacked to the kitchen wall, written in June's best cursive, "The hero came on time." June, now fully embracing her role as the house's true commander, had taken on Cassian's re-education. She was currently teaching him how to make taffy, a disastrous, sticky process. "No," she giggled, as a long strand of hot sugar attached itself to Cassian's arm. "You have to pull it like this. You're too slow." He was hopelessly clumsy, a man who could run an empire but could not master a simple candy. He looked at Mira over June's head, his expression one of mock exasperation, but his eyes were full of a light she had never seen before. A family, built not on blood but on a dare, on a single brave day. The calm, however, was temporary. A week later, a single cream-colored envelope arrived at the Day 17 bakery. It was not addressed to Mira, but to the captain. Inside, there was no letter, just a small steel hard drive, one that did not match the 6 from the ledger, and a typewritten note. "The Fuse ledger has more than one page. See you on December 17th. A new shadow, a new date." That night, Cashin stood with Mira by the apartment window, watching the rain lash against the glass, the lights of Harbor City blurred and indistinct. He held the small, cold hard drive in his hand. "If there is another 17th," he said, his voice quiet, "and another after that, I will still be there. I will still show up." Mira leaned her head against his shoulder, her hand coming up to cover his, the metal cold beneath her skin. "I know," she said, "just as long as you promise. No more laughing at your fears." He turned, pulling her into his arms, and held her as the storm broke over the harbor. The next morning, Cashin walked June to school, her small hand in his. The IAB agents were gone, replaced by the normal morning chaos of parents and children. As she ran for the school bell, Cashin called her back. He knelt, just as he had on the bridge. "June," he said, his voice serious. "That day, on the rooftop, you called me a coward." She winced, thinking she was in trouble. I wanted to say thank you," he said. Her eyes went wide. She processed this, her head tilting. A slow, mischievous smile spread across her face. "Okay, then for the Winter Festival," she commanded, tapping his nose. "You have to dress up as a pirate, with a hat." He looked at her, at this small, terrifying, wonderful girl. He sighed, a mask of defeated surrender. "A captain," he said, "always follows his little captain's orders." Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know your thoughts. Where in the world are you listening from? Please let us know in the comments so we can all connect. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Story, and give this video a like. And to help this story reach even more listeners, please support us by hitting that hype button